All right, so we're diving deep into Colossians 1:16.
Okay.
And I know you're not here for just the basic Sunday school stuff.
Right.
You want that deeper insight, the kind that'll make people in your congregation say, whoa, I never thought about it that
Well,
way.
exactly. We're talking about sparking new sermons and getting those lively discussions going in Bible study.
Yeah, and we've got a ton of inspiration for you today. We've been looking into how pastors across the country are preaching on this verse,
Yeah.
and they are bringing some really unique perspectives to Colossians 1:16.
It's really fascinating to see how they're going beyond just the surface level.
Well,
It's
yeah.
not just about Jesus created everything. They're really exploring what that means. Like, what are the deeper implications of that statement?
Yeah, like for example, Franklin Church of Christ in Tennessee.
Okay.
They use Colossians 1:16 as a jumping off point to talk about stewardship, our responsibility to care for creation.
All right. And what's so powerful about the way they approach it is the connection they make between our relationship with Christ and our role as stewards.
Okay.
They're saying because we're connected to the Creator, we're not just in creation, but we're actually responsible for it.
Oh, it's not just an idea. It's like a call to action almost.
Exactly. It challenges us to look at our everyday choices.
Mm-hmm.
How we consume, how we treat the environment through the lens of Colossians 1:16. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences not just for us, but for the whole world.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful way to make it relevant.
Yeah, definitely. And then you have Beulah Baptist Church.
Okay.
They focus on those invisible things that are mentioned in Colossians 1:16.
Right. I think that phrase can be confusing. What are those invisible things?
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of questions like, what are we even talking about here?
Yeah.
Well, Beulah Baptist connects this idea to predestination. They're saying that if even the invisible things were created through Christ, then that must include spiritual realities, even our own souls, before the creation of the world.
So they're saying that we were already part of God's plan before creation.
Exactly. It shows how intentional God was when he created us. We're not just some random accident, but we were carefully planned and woven into the universe from the very beginning.
Okay, now that is mind-blowing.
Right.
Really has a whole new way of thinking about our place in God's plan.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of mind-blowing, Impact Church FXBG takes a really interesting approach.
Okay.
They focus on the Greek word icon, which is used to describe Jesus in this verse.
Instead of just image.
Right.
What's the difference?
Well, icon means more than just a visual representation.
Yep.
It's like an exact copy, a perfect match.
Yeah.
They're emphasizing that Jesus isn't just like God, he is God perfectly reflecting the Father.
So it's like a much stronger statement about who Jesus is.
Exactly. And they also talk about the word firstborn in this verse.
Okay, now when I hear firstborn, I immediately think about birth order.
Right, but Impact Church FXBG points out that the original Greek word has a much deeper meaning.
Okay.
It's more about authority, like being first in rank, having the right to inherit.
Okay.
So when Colossians says Jesus is the firstborn of all creation, it's not just about when he was born.
Right.
It's about his authority over all of creation.
It's less about when he was born, more about his position as ruler.
Exactly. And that changes how we see our own relationship with God. If Jesus has ultimate authority, then we should follow him, obey him, worship him.
So we've seen stewardship, predestination, this deeper look at Jesus as the icon.
Yeah.
I was starting to see how much depth there is to Colossians 1:16.
Oh, yeah. There's so much there. And we haven't even talked about how it relates to science.
Wait, science. How do they tie Colossians 1:16 to science?
Well, they focus on the phrase, in him all things hold together.
Okay.
And then they ask this really interesting question. Could this be talking about dark matter?
Dark matter. That's stuff that scientists say makes up a big part of the universe, but we can't even see it.
That's the one. They're suggesting that maybe this mysterious force that's holding the universe together is actually Christ's power.
Oh.
Like they're trying to understand these huge scientific mysteries using the Bible.
That's pretty amazing. I love how they're connecting faith and science like that.
Yeah, it's a great example of how the Bible can help us understand the world around us, even in things that seem purely scientific. And it's not just all heady stuff either. These pastors are using some really creative illustrations to bring Colossians 1:16 to life.
Yeah, they're definitely not using the same old tired Sunday school illustrations.
Right, like Graceland Church. They use the Mandela Effect to illustrate how important it is to go back to the source, the Bible, to make sure we're understanding things correctly.
Oh yeah, the Mandela Effect. For people who don't know, it's when a bunch of people all have this same false memory about something.
Right.
Like I always thought the Fruit of the Loom logo had a cornucopia.
Huh?
Turns out it never did.
Exactly. And Graceland Church uses that to talk about how our understanding of Jesus can get messed up over time.
Right.
We might be holding on to ideas or traditions that aren't actually in the Bible.
So it's like a reminder to always check what we believe against the Bible.
Exactly, to make sure we're not building our faith on something shaky.
Right.
It's a really smart way to use something from pop culture to make a serious point about the Bible.
Yeah, something that people can relate to and that makes them think.
And speaking of relatable impact, Church, FXBG used a clip from the movie Talladega Nights.
Oh, yeah. Heard about this.
It's that scene where Ricky Bobby's praying to baby Jesus to win the race.
Right.
And his wife has to remind him that baby Jesus isn't who he should be praying to.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
It's a funny scene, but it makes a good point about how we sometimes create our own versions of Jesus.
Right. Like we try to make Jesus into what we want him to be instead of who he really is.
Exactly. And I think using humor like that can really help people let their guard down. It lets people laugh at themselves and see how they might be distorting the image of Jesus without realizing it.
It definitely makes the sermon more memorable. I bet people walked out of there talking about Ricky Bobby and baby Jesus.
Hopefully it got them thinking more about what it really means to know and follow Jesus.
So we've got pop culture now for a more literary illustration. Graceland Church talked about Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They talked about how Lucy keeps seeing Aslan as a small lion until she realizes that he's actually much bigger than she thought.
That's such a powerful analogy for how we grow in our faith.
Right.
As we learn more about Jesus, we start to see more of his glory and power and majesty.
It's like we're always discovering something new about him.
Yeah.
And that never really ends, does it?
Not at all. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about being a Christian. There's always more to learn and experience in our relationship with Jesus.
So we've got stewardship, predestination, the meaning of icon, and firstborn connections to science, and now all these creative illustrations. It's amazing to see how much these pastors are finding in just one verse.
It really shows how rich and deep this passage is. There's something there for everyone, no matter who they are or how much they know about the Bible.
And for those of us who preach and teach, it's a good reminder that we don't have to stick to the same old boring ways of doing things.
Right.
There's always room to be creative and think outside the box to connect people with the truth of the Bible.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from these sermons. The more we dig into Colossians 1:16, the more we see that it's not just a verse to memorize, it's a truth to live by.
Yeah.
It's a way of looking at the world, our relationships, everything.
So how do we take all of this, the theology, the illustrations, the call to action, and make it real for our own audiences?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think the key is to remember who you're talking to.
Right.
What do they need? What are their questions? What are they struggling with? How can we share these truths in a way that they'll connect with, that will challenge them and inspire them to actually live differently?
I feel like we've just scratched the surface here, but it's clear that Colossians 1:16 is more than just a nice verse to put on a mug or something.
Right. It's a powerful statement about who Jesus is, his role in creation, and our place in it all.
And these pastors have given us a ton of ideas for how to teach this in a way that's both engaging and relevant for people today.
Yeah, exactly. They've shown us that it's okay to be creative, to use illustrations, and even connect it with things like science.
One of the things I'm taking away from this is that it's okay to have fun with this stuff. You know, we don't have to be all serious and boring when we're talking about God.
Totally. A little humor can go a long way.
Yeah, and I love how these pastors aren't afraid to challenge the traditional ways of thinking about this verse or to ask tough questions. They're not just repeating what they've heard before, they're really digging into the text and trying to understand it in a new way.
And that's what makes their sermons so interesting. They're not just giving us answers, they're inviting us to be part of the conversation, to keep searching for truth together.
So as you're preparing your next sermon or Bible study on Colossians 1:16, I think the most important question to ask yourself is this.
How can I share this verse in a way that will really grab my audience's attention? How can I make it relevant to their lives, their struggles, their hopes and dreams?
Don't be afraid to try some of the things these pastors did. Use humor, pop culture references, scientific insights, whatever it takes to make Colossians 1:16 come alive for the people you're talking to.
Remember, it's not just about giving people information, it's about changing their lives. It's about helping them see the world in a new way, inspiring them to live a life that shows Jesus is Lord of everything.
Because if everything was created through and for Christ, that changes everything. Changes how we view our jobs, our relationships, our responsibilities, even the small things in our daily lives.
That's the challenge of Colossians 1:16. It's not just something to study, it's something to live out.
We hope this deep dive has given you some new ideas and inspiration to do just that.
Go out there and make Colossians 1:16 come alive.